Well, welcome to the last session here. This is the intergenerational panel. My name is John Becker. I'm over at Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach in the Religious Studies Department. I am a recent father to a 4-month-old that is in the back hanging out. So my participation has been limited just because I don't think I need to say much, a 4-month-old, right? So, but I'm happy to be here and do this final panel here. And we have a stellar group of people. I'm going to read some of their bios here, except Andrew Schwartz. And that's not intentional. That's just because everyone knows Andrew, and he's somewhat of a last-minute shoe-in here for us to be on the more elder side of things of this panel.
Let my gray hair beard grow out,
Yes.
so I can represent the older generation.
Yes. I thought I'm 40, so I'm old to some and young to others, so I'm like perfectly in the middle here. So first we have Andrew Schwartz, the executive director of the Center for Process Studies and a assistant professor? Associate professor at Claremont School of Theology. Next we have Jared, who Andrew may be the face, but Jared does a lot of the back. He's the brains of everything here. So he's an independent scholar, and he currently works for the Center for Process Studies in the Psychedelic Medicine Association. Keeping it very brief here. I just had the pleasure of meeting Ryan Lowe here. He is a rising senior at Palisades Verde Peninsula High School. As he said, he likes to get down low to help the environment. I think it's good. Yeah. It's a good catch. Next to me, we have Dr. Philip Clayton, the president of the Institute for Ecological Civilization and recently retired as the Ingram Chair at Claremont School of Theology. That's enough. Okay. Yes. So that's enough for Dr. Clayton here. Next, we have Xinlin Song. She is the youth program director at the Institute for Postmodern Development of China. She is an educator and community activist. She is developing a riverversity inspired by ecoversity movement, curricula connecting learning centers along China's major rivers. Very fascinating. And then lastly, we have Dr. Isabella Zhang. She is the founder of the ACT Asia China, or ACT Asia, a co-developer of the Caring for Life education program at Zhuzhou University of Science and Technology, and a researcher in general education at the Institute of One Health, Wenzhou Medical University. So first of all, let's welcome all of our panelists up here. Now, the directions I gave the speakers were very informal, right? And so we're going to start off with essentially what they see that is promising for the future, given our predicament in which we are currently living, and what are some of the concrete steps they think are necessary, right? So, of course, we know there's a problem. Of course, we see hope along with some negative aspects of it. But what could be concretely done moving forward? And so we'll just start off the conversation. And then, of course, just let me remind our panelists to have one of these mics up close to them as they respond. So I'll just open it up. Well, actually, let me start with Andrew, just because.
I wanted to start with Ryan.
Oh, sure.
Yes, our rising senior.
Yeah. Hi. I was one of like the Living Earth like finalists, and one of like the main things that like I went into was like clean energy, renewable sources of energy. I just want to get your thoughts about like solar energy, because they're like the big problem with solar energy is like the duck curve. So when like the demand is like high, but the energy production is low, and then the energy production is high and the demand is low. That's like why like people tell you to use energy at certain parts of the time. And just guys want to like get your guys' thoughts on like how to move forward in looking at solar energy, like the positives and also the negatives of solar energy. If you guys have any like thoughts on that.
Okay. Anyone?
My general sense is that solar energy is better than, the other alternatives. Fossil fuel energy doesn't mean it's perfect. And hopefully as technology improves, so will the efficiency of our renewable energies. But rather than simply relying on new technologies to fix it, we're going to have to change the way that we structure society, the way we consume power. And so, to me at least, there's not a simple like straight path of here's the answer. It's going to take a lot of different pieces together.
Yeah, and I think we'll need to use a combination of different technology and energy sources. Yeah, solar might have these drawbacks, and maybe that's something that hydropower could help kind of fill in a bit. And so figuring out the best ways to stitch some of that technical stuff together into something a little more holistic, robust, and sustainable, of course.
Or like kinetic energy. So like having children on bicycles all around the world to produce power for, you heard it here. You heard it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Free, completely free.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 我用中文好，I will speak in Chinese 在我的想法当中，或者是希望当中，未来在能源或者是这个电力方面，可能我们更多的去看到植物的这个部分，然后如果有技术的发展的话，就是植物可以吸收更多的太阳能转化，那我们有没有可能更多的向植物学习，然后用技术去让这个更生态的能源出来？对。
How can we learn from the plant as it receives the love from the sun and then turn that into energy? Can we learn from the plant world and develop technologies that can do that work?
All right. Well, let's turn to Philip now and see if he has any hopes that he sees for the future or setbacks and some of the concrete ways we might go about it.
Yeah, I liked your opening questions. And the thing that gives me the most hope is the formation of small communities, whether it's the local universities, whether it's people working together on the projects that you guys have been working on, that we bond so easily as human beings. We become friends with people when we're shared in a project. And what feels like the necessary step to succeed, that I think was your second question, is if we can do what John Cobb kept saying, can we just build communities of these communities? If we can just begin to get those structures in place for that next level up, then we can magnify our impact by much. We've done it in scholarship in the past. Actually, Andrew and I were just talking, how can we do it now? From people working on particular questions to getting us broader network sharing in it. Is it social media? Is it electronic connection? Is it proximity, that we work with people that we can get there, by public transportation within half an hour or an hour? I'm not sure, but that would be the next necessary step.
Good. Thank you.
Can I add on to something? I think abstractions always make me nervous. Abstractions makes me nervous. If we go to too much of a heady mental abstractions, it brings fear. It brings, possible stories that put me into a zone. That those are all mental constructs. And from my experiences in past years of working in the Tibetan communities, like doing daily chores, but also reading global news, but at the same time, I'm help harvesting the plants. And then I felt that the more concrete I can be, the more confident I have, the more physical I could engage with land and people and water, and the more confidence I receive. I think that's bringing that mind into open heart and onto the land with physical, real physical interactions to it, and let all the knowledge that we learn sipping into our whole being. I think that's difficult but easy in some way, and then that really brings me hope.
Beautiful. Andrew.
So if I'm being honest with myself, I actually think I'm the opposite of what you just said, Vivian. I think abstractions comfort me because it allows me to disassociate a little bit from the reality of what's happening in real communities, in the real world. So if I can intellectualize about climate crises, environmental issues, economic issues, social injustices, and then I can think about all the, we got to change this and change these structures and systems and policies. Then I feel like, okay, I'm kind of safe, right? And it doesn't require as much of me. It doesn't require like me actually like investing my life and my relationships, in my friendships, my communities. Like, so it's interesting that you find comfort in, of moving away from abstraction, and I find escape in moving toward abstraction, which is not necessarily what I'm recommending for everybody. I'm just acknowledging that in myself.
I can relate to. I mean, being in an environment there's a lot of chaos happening, and in my kind of the concreteness and the real stories that kind of makes you nervous. But I also want to see that what really gives me hope is this popping up, emerging news stories of our time. I'd love to identify them, cultivate them, and bring myself into them, help nurturing that to happen. And perhaps adding on to what we have discussed, and that more holistically gave me hope. And would you like to live in that news story?
Yeah, maybe if I lived in your story, I'd have more hope.
Yeah, come join us.
I find myself oscillating between the Eeyore of Cliff Cobb and the Tigger of Philip Clayton, and I don't know if I'm a Piglet or a Pooh, maybe but yeah.
Philip, you want to?
Well, I just want to ask you a follow-up question. What are the kinds of projects that give you hope? You spoke of the things that you see that encourage you. Can you mention some?
Oh, a lot. I'll tell a short experience. I was in a Tibetan mountain 3 years ago in a hot summer. We were doing some community service, like actually putting up furnitures together with a herdsman. And that is the summer China had an unusual floods everywhere. And even the central province of Shandong, Henan, got flooded. And then I was on the 4,000 meter high plateau with this Tibetan herdsman who had never been out of his mountain. And I looked to him and I say, hey, we're so lucky. We're in this place, beautiful sun and nice, environment, and we don't have to be bothered by that nervous stories around China. And I was telling him this, and then he looked at me and look at the mountains behind us, and he pointing to the top of the mountain, which that is one of the highest mountain in our Sichuan province that will have always snow-capped mountain. He said, do you notice that big rock on top of the mountain? When I was little, 30 years ago, even in a hot summer, that rock was covered. Now you can see the black rock is there. And less water here, more water at your side. So I'm not surprised. And I could relate to what you're saying. And that is one piece of gift, knowledge, wisdom that I've received more than anywhere I've learned from school. And that is a concrete story. That's a concrete, real community with person who has that wisdom. And then that was my inspiration. I want to, bring people to go to him and learn about the stories. And in that concreteness, we gain confidence into our wisdoms, into our traditions, and perhaps bringing that back into our work, me or scholars or entrepreneurs, and bring that stories of relatedness and time-tested wisdom into whatever work that we do, that long-term thinking, deep time thinking into what we do, perhaps that bring a different news story.
Beautiful answer.
Maybe I want to. 我还是用中文好。对，其实刚才我听心灵讲的时候，我就想起了大概在很多年前，九年还是10年前，然后我曾经去冈仁波齐转山，然后那因为是高海拔的地区，我是有严重的高反，所以呢，我应该是3天的旅程，那我在第2天的时候，我已经高反非常严重了，但是那个时候我没有办法后退，我只能走，因为大概是5600多米的这个高海拔，但我旁边就有一个是藏族的一个小伙子，然后他不会汉语，我也不会讲他的语言，但是他用他的眼睛看我一眼，但我每走一步我就要休息一下，然后他就看我，然后我一路我大概最后一天我走了20多公里高海拔地区，等到我走下来的时候， 他向我笑。其实在我走全程的时候，我是听不见任何声音，我也看不见别的东西，我就看到尘土飞起，看到他那双眼睛。所以有的时候就是当我们去讲就是在故事之中的时候，除了自然的所谓美好的东西之外，还有最强的人性的连接，它会给我觉得未来就在前面，然后我只要往前走，往前走就可以抵达我的目的地。Please.
I'm gonna spill out the gem, the really like catching part of her story, responding to your question. Like, what is a concrete step moving forward? The answer she gives is left and right. Left leg, right leg, moving forward.
Yeah.
And she told that story in her pilgrimage at Mount Kailash, one of the most prestigious, important sacred mountains in the Himalayan regions. And she had this pilgrimage trip onto the 5,600 meters above sea level, and she had a migraine, and she really want to give up, but you can't because you have already walked this far and you can't go back. And in this kind of conundrum, don't know, where to go and how to get there. And she saw a Tibetan boy, a young boy. They could not communicate with each other just by this boy looking at her and giving her some support and kind of leading her away, kind of walking alongside with her. And she walked out. She finished that pilgrim. And in those process, she could only see that dust coming out of the pathway, and then also the Tibetan boy's smile that goes to her. So she said that, in us telling this story, it's important to also bring the humanity, the human connections into it, and then this concreteness of left and right, one step forward, and we're walking our way out of the crisis.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
So like when talking about like moving forward, I think it's really important to have some positivity, because I think positivity in the negative specifically is the most powerful. Looking at like a specific social issue, a specific environmental issue, if you just approach it with like pure negativity, just look at the problems, it doesn't give like the hope that you guys were talking about. In my younger sort of perspective, one like good example that I thought of was like something called the USC Mind Challenge, which was like sort of like an ice bucket challenge, raising like awareness about mental health. If you looked at the mental health crisis, it's really disparaging, and a lot of issues on that, and you just focus on that, it wouldn't give people hope. But if you approach that sort of problem with some positivity in that, in this sort of challenge, people like basically dumped ice on themselves to spread awareness. I think that's really powerful in like spreading a message and raising awareness.
Yeah, and I feel like the stories themselves can be a source of positivity and this kind of a tractor for where we're going. Figuring out how to not just in this kind of naive optimism sort of way, but actually having a vision, and maybe it is very concrete and from a personal experience, but maybe there are helpful, positive ways that this can be intellectual, be abstract, and maybe we don't need to think about these things as opposed, but complementary. And maybe there's a space for a little escapism as we take space to emotionally ground ourselves and be able to start engaging in whatever way that we can have our own disposition leverage towards to come at that from a place of grounding and healthfulness. So you don't always need to be in kind of maximal anxiety and concern, and hopefully stories and hopefully some intellectualizing can be helpful there.
Jared, I love it how you emphasize stories. Listening to Susan today, I realized that in the environmental movement, even our stars like Naomi Klein are not particularly good at telling stories. When you hear one well-told story, you know how badly we generally do. And especially the philosophers and so forth among us, the abstract types. So I wonder, what are some effective stories that you guys either have heard or yourselves lived that we could practice telling, that I could practice telling your story when I appear with audiences? Because Susan really convinced me, and Jared emphasizes, it's the stories that communicate the best. You are our coyote.
I think we should start a press like circulating new stories, hopeful stories, identifying them. I think they're all around us. Yeah, it's as much as the gloomsday story. Maybe we should do bloomsday story.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, nice.
No, it's not my first language, so I'm like express myself, like making jokes.
But it totally works.
It works.
Blooms.
100%.
Yeah, it starts from here. So yeah, I mean, especially for
Yeah.
good. Yeah, especially for engaging with young minds and hearts today, they're craving for a positive story that they can step themselves into. I mean, I think that's several years ago there was, I don't know if they're still around, a Yes Man, and they created this fake magazine. No, fake New York Times, and only good stories written on the fake New York Times. Then they spread out on the street of New York, and people read about it. Our taxes going down, our war is ending, and then they had new positivities around, but more realistic, as Jared says, rational naivety. I think that's what us a little bit mature, or as humanity could collectively becoming more mature, and we could reach to that naivety, earnest positivity, but we're also rational. We're backed with science. We're backed with philosophy. And we bring that together. I think that's the Bloomsday, Bloomsday news could, back up from there.
Yeah, maybe I add another story about, because you focus on hyena, but I think I want to focus on the fox. Yeah, fox, a fox story. In Chinese is okay. 其实我想讲的关于狐狸的故事呢，是因为我们a.k.a. 以前在做的一个项目是关于灵皮草的一个项目，所以我们其实有一个故事关于小狐狸找妈妈的故事。那因为狐狸妈妈她的皮毛被变成了衣服，所以小狐狸去找她的妈妈。那这个故事呢，是经过一个小孩子，就是我们在珠海有一个2年级的小学生，然后在他的班级就讲了这个小狐狸找妈妈的故事，而且他把这个故事带给了他的同学，带给了他的老师，最后他们这个学校的校长就问这个孩子的妈妈说：“哎，你的孩子为什么会讲这个小狐狸找妈妈的故事？”他讲不要穿皮草，因为小朋友就跟他的老师说，请你不要买皮草，然后跟他同学说，请你回家跟你爸妈说不要买皮草。结果这个校长就跟我们说，跟他的妈妈说，他妈妈是我们同事，行动亚洲同事，那你们有没有课程给孩子们去教学，去了解为什么不要去选皮草？结果我们行动亚洲就因为这个问题就开始了就是生命关怀教育的创新。所以我们从2012年开始在中国就开启了这个项目，现在一直都还有，就这样。所以这是一个关于狐狸的故事，对。
是先有了这个故事，
先有了这个故事，再有了我们这个教育项目，对。
先给他们说一下。Okay, so there's an actual concrete examples and their organization did in caring for a wildlife, and they first discovered a story told by a young boy around second. A girl telling the stories of little fox looking for her mom. And then she told the story to her teachers, to her families, and then telling them not to buy fur. And she told them by telling them a story. Little fox couldn't find her mom because her mom was, taken into factories and also. And then from that story, and they've developed that into kind of a campaign for caring for wildlife. And then the school teacher asked her, this is very effective. Do you guys have classes that you could teach storytelling about environment and protection? And then they get inspired and start developing such storytelling workshops.
Yeah, the caring for life education. Yes, getting from this girl.
Thank you.
So I'll chime in. I think changing the narrative is crucially important. And I think there is a lot of negativity surrounding the environment. I know Ryan talked about this. There's like this eco grief, right? This term that we've heard about, that we can't do anything. But the question that was posed earlier about what kind of like stories can we tell, I'm reminded of the Chinese intellectual tradition, right? They have those three sagely emperors. I'm thinking of you in particular, that had the rainwaters, right? Was able to navigate the rainwaters differently, right? So there was a lot of flooding going on in China at the time. This kind of mythical emperor, yeah, and rather than working against the floodwaters, he learned how to channel the floodwaters, right? And so it's these kind of rich cultural stories that I think will have a great impact, but relatively most people don't know about these kind of cultural stories, right? They need to be repackaged in a way that could show the importance of, right, this kind of like ancient wisdom that's been around, and something that we're now returning to, realizing that we don't have control over nature all the time, that we have to work with nature in order to get the best results. And so I know you is one of those stories, and how he navigated the floodwaters is one of those that always resonates with me, right? Andrew, I think you had a comment here.
Yeah. Something, as I listen to the wisdom at the panel up here, that strikes me is that when we're telling the story of ecological civilization, it's a story that is becoming. It's a story that maybe is already, but not yet. But it's a story that's emerging, right? So we're telling our story, which is very weird, because it's not like we're telling a story secondhand or third hand or story from a past. We're telling the story of what's becoming. It's, I don't know, it strikes me as strange, but how to capture that in its diversity, right? In real time, right? Or at least like near real time. Seems like that's maybe part of the challenge, but also maybe one of the strategies that we can look at.
I think I can add something a little to stories. I think stories can be a great way to connect us with like the environment, with the nature, because often, like in our busy world, we often forget that we're living on the earth, we're living in nature. One of the things I remember in my childhood, like hungry little caterpillar, good night moon, like those sort of stories like foster that like sense of wonder around the nature. But I think stories really need to be used to like remind us that we're still living on earth, still living in nature.
Yeah.
I want to share with you. There's the other half of the youth story, and that's perhaps responding to what Andrew says, and how do we capture that diversity, and a story has life, right? It's a whole being, and if you look at this person from back in, in life or eating, you're all different, and that story has different shapes. And I recently uncovered there's another half of the youth story. In order to manage the water, go around the water, he did his trick, and then he also is a great traveler. He travels all around the rivers in China, and then he caught up a conference that must be the first water conference around the world back then. And he caught up a conference and gathered all the tribe leaders from all around the water community, and then he created this ritual object with an errand, like a special metal, and he created 9 of them, and he gave it to the 9 main tribes who gathered at the conference. They bring this as a commitment and to do the same to the water, and they bring it back. So this is the Dayu story has so many facets. There's also about him passing his family door. He never walks in because he's so busy working for the public, and then that. So kind of bringing back the multi layers of that story, and then kind of reviving into today's age and telling the fuller of the story that we can tell, and the fuller we could, I think, perhaps like work in today's world. So that's also this inspiration to say, how can we create a modern stories of bringing the water together, people around the water together, and we can communicate and work, and then go back to our community and do our work.
So you can be you too.
Modern.
Yeah, I think some of the interesting features about the stories that we will be telling here is they are both ancient and totally contemporary, old and coming into being for the first time. And there's that paradoxical aspect to it. And likewise, these are local stories from particular regions, particular traditions and biological context, eco context, but simultaneously global traditions and ones that involve all of humanity and all of the biosphere. And so figuring out how to no longer hold those as dualisms, but a kind of holistic aspect of the kinds of stories we're telling.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to end out the panel. I know we're supposed to leave a little bit of room for some closing remarks. And I see Jaha has creeped his way.
Remarks. So who knows how
Jaha
long that will
creeped
take.
forward here. So I'll invite Jaha up to give some closing remarks for the conference since he's nearby. But first, I'd like to thank our panelists. Very informative, right? Kind of navigating between the abstract and the more concrete, right? And I would say there has to be some type of experiential component, which leads to the abstract. So something happened to you in your childhood that led you down this path, I'll say. I'm just throwing it out there, right? You have to become, this type of experientialness, right? Being in nature kind of gives us wonderment, which makes us start thinking deeper about these things. So yes, I'll end with a jab at Andrew here. So let me invite up Jaha here. So yes, as Jaha's coming up, we give a round of applause for our panelists.